And that's actually a really good segue to bring up inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility in D&D, which I was thinking a lot about this topic and how to discuss it at the DM Roundtable, but I think we can condense it into its most simplistic form and kind of tack it on as part of a broader discussion about Session Zero and inclusivity in D&D. And when we were talking before, that's actually, again, Folkard, a perfect segue to talk about Daniel Kwan, who is one of the authors of Candlekeep Mysteries, who has done several interviews, both with D&D Beyond and with other third-party agencies. But I would like to point everyone to the D&D Beyond interviews because they are very poignant and very powerful. And the only thing that I can say as a white person about being more inclusive to people of color in D&D is to listen, to amplify the voices of people of color, to do your appropriate research, and listening, I think, is the most important thing. And doing our own research so that we don't have to burden others with teaching us, because we hear this a lot. It can be exhausting. It can be exhausting to say, hey, I've been taught something so specific my whole life that is not an accurate representation. Can you fix this for me? To say that to a person of color, it is exhausting because we're all busy, and frankly, what I've been told is, they have better things to do than educate,
Right, it's not their
us. Yes,
responsibility to educate
exactly.
us. Yeah.
So when you have an opportunity to watch and listen to someone like Daniel Kwan, who is a public figure, those are the kind of things that I recommend seeking out.
Hmm.
Finding individuals who are in the public eye, who do speak on this sort of thing, doing your own research in that regard, and listening to Asian content creators, Black content creators, brown content creators, MENA content creators, listening to what they have to say, taking that and using it to shape your D&D worlds beyond just an Anglo-European perspective. And I think in the process of listening and amplifying these voices, we can make generally better D&D worlds. And the same goes for disability and listening to disabled persons. And that's how we got the combat chair, which I have used in our Tomb of Annihilation campaign to have a
Amazing.
disabled NPC. And I think people just really genuinely appreciate the honest attempt to listen, take what you have heard, integrate it into your D&D campaign, and that's the simplified version. And that's all I have on the matter.
Right, yeah, just you have to be open to the idea of changing things, and especially in a game that has been around for so long with so many old school ideas still embedded deeply in its culture. Like as DMs, you just have to be open to learning from other people and adjusting as you go. As I start diving into like a new campaign based on the Ghost of Saltmarsh, one of the things I'm reading is like, it's very closed off. They don't like outsiders, and that makes sense for a small fishing town. But in
Mm-hmm.
the way that they phrased it, it was very much like restrictive of races and everything like that. And to me, I had players who wanted to play a bunch of different stuff, and I was like, I don't feel as a port town that we need to be that exclusive within like the fantasy setting. And I felt like I had players that were very appreciative of that as like just carrying it
Yeah.
through, like, okay, that's just echoing what we want to see in real life too, right? Like changing these things to be more inclusive and including those types of things. So just be willing to adjust and meet those expectations. I really loved the interview that you shared about the combat chair. I knew about the actual item. I had not listened to the interview yet though, and that was like great to really hear and listen to Sarah talk about. Also watching the one with Jen, Kretschmer
Yep.
about her work on Candlekeep and everything. And uh, yeah, great resources. Definitely go and just start there, and everything else will, keep coming. But use those opportunities as they come up to be open to expanding and moving forward with empathy and just, yeah.
Yeah. And the other one of the most important things I learned as well was that you have to also be open to criticism when it comes to
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
diversity, equality, and inclusion. Being able to respond to criticism. If you're someone, the most important thing that I learned from people of color was that as a white person, if you feel like you have to be right and that you are right about everything, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like there's no improvement. I think a lot of it is just being able to accept criticism and to be like, I was completely wrong about X, Y, or Z. Let's change it and improve it.
There were a couple of notes that I had just after watching those interviews, some good points I thought that they made too. Um, just the idea that we are working within fantastical worlds and it doesn't have to mimic real life ableism or politics or anything like that.
Hmm.
So, just as much as that is like ingrained in us to kind of default to, just if we can have magic, we can have that chair that can withstand battle and everything, right? Like
Right.
just yeah, don't get too hung up on that. But the other big one, especially in including racial diversity too, is do not make your only racially diverse character your BBEG. Like, don't
Yes.
always make them
Villain
the
coding.
villain or the bad guy or anything like that. Like, your diversity should feel natural and not forced or token or anything. Um,
Well,
yeah.
I think a lot of it too is I know it's there's slightly different histories throughout the world based on
Hmm.
geographical location, but in the United States particularly, there is deep
Yep.
seated systemic racism built into the fabric of the United States, and here in the U.S. it's extremely important to listen and amplify and be able to change. Um, and I think that is really where it is most relevant is in the United States because of that deep-seated history that this country was unfortunately built on. It's a disgrace and uh, a travesty, and I think we're just doing our best to to decolonize ourselves and
Right.
to embrace sort of other voices beyond our own.
I don't know. I don't feel like I have a lot of kind of authority to talk about
The
race.
same, yeah. I think we're all in
Yeah.
the same boat. So that's why I said listen and amplify. Just do our best.
Uh, Especially because like Ukraine is not a really a multinational
Mm-hmm.
country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right,
uh,
different history.
yeah. So we have like like different like nationalities. Like they're Polish people, Russian people,
Mm-hmm.
but we are kind of the same race.
Right. Yep.
Uh, but maybe because of that, and especially when I was a kid in the 90s, I think that our society was extremely racist. Because, like, uh, by the way, when I was a kid, when I first heard the term like a black person, I remember I wondered, why black? I mean, they're brown. Like, why are they called black? But anyway, that's just a footnote.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I don't think anyone would fault you for being a Ukrainian national. Again, I think it's important for, especially important for myself and Liza as being people in the United States to be like, no, the biggest problem, is this is almost like ground zero. I think in a lot of ways, and I think that we have a responsibility to work harder um, to 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 address this. And of course, we all should, but again, the United States is almost like ground zero
Mhm.
for racism, and it's really, especially with what's been happening here politically, and it's just so like I just feel dirty being in this country sometimes.
oh
Yep.
God. Well, speaking of again Ukraine, even now, some people are. I think a lot of my friends, like coworkers, when I worked at a company, people are. I think they're racist and they don't realize it
Mm,
because they called like other races with like slur. They use a lot of slur because nobody's around from those races. So why even bother?
That's a whole nother
And
can of worms.
it always bothered me. Like I cringe when I hear those words.
That's a good thing.
And from my side in my games, even though we're all white here, I still use like for instance, last game that I was running, it was like in a cyberpunk setting, and there was like a band of these hackers, netrunners, and I just naturally thought of like I want all the archetypes of people. So there was like the main guy was a Latino, then there was a white woman, an Asian woman, and the Hawaiian guy. And my players too. One was like from Ecuador, and the other one was Asian. So, I mean, that's my little investment in diversity. I hope I let these people kind of experience being in the same room with different kinds of people, and because Dungeons and Dragons is sort of like literature, like reading a book, gaining the experience of a separate person being in somebody else's shoes, but even amplified, I suppose, because you're actually playing the role. And I try to include all kinds of stuff and not even emphasize on this because I really like when I think of this. I always recall one interview with Morgan Freeman when an interviewer asked him like, "Let's talk about racism," and he said like, "The racism will end when we will stop talking about racism."
Yeah.
And I mean, out of context, this phrase might be received wrong. So, let's just not talk about racism. But no, it's like a course for me. Like when the necessity of talking about racism or sexism or homophobia, transphobia, and all those kinds of stuff, when the necessity is not there anymore, that's what he meant. So what I try to do in my games is just I include stuff in there. So I say, okay, this is a CEO of a corporation. Again, I'm referring to the last game I played. Don't be confused. And that's his husband. And I don't emphasize on that. And when people see that I have a completely straight face while talking, while discussing moments like that, they receive it absolutely normal. And I hope that I kind of plant a seed in their minds that okay, this is not a big deal. Because again, sexism and homophobia is a huge thing here in Ukraine, and people might not even realize it, especially sexism. People are extremely sexist. I mean, it's like in the blood, and you don't think about it even. But some horrible things are just being done every day, and nobody cares about it.
Well, I try to include a lot of queer characters as a polyamorous pansexual queer trans woman. I have a lot of experience firsthand, so I queer code as many characters as possible, and then also putting women into the world more often, and then again listening. But I don't think Folkard, I think you summed it up perfectly. I don't think that I could top that. I don't know about anyone else, but I think that's a good final thought to wrap up with.
I also absolutely love making like the toughest guys in my like a mafia boss.
Yeah.
And he has a boyfriend.
Absolutely.
Which is even
Bring
tougher. It on. And yeah, that's my favorite thing to do with my characters. But yeah, I also don't like to put like claims on like labels. I mean, so this is a gay person. I don't like it.
Yeah, that gay shit. Me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to sum it all up, it's just leading by example, right? With D&D, we are creating these worlds, and we want to create a world that is inclusive and respectful and welcoming to all people and all walks of life. So we do that by doing it naturally, not drawing attention to it, not othering things. Because by pointing it out and being like, oh yeah, this is my gay NPC, it's like, well, you just
Exactly.
othered him and made him like your token
Yeah.
favorite. Like, just make it natural.
Yep, don't call attention to it.
Right, exactly. As if you present it as normal, it's going to start to become the normal, and that's how we move forward, both in our campaigns and in real world, like real life, and translating them back and forth. So
Awesome.
Right.
Well, thank you, all of you, for your input on this. It's appreciated.